Last winter, when days were short and COVID continued to make life difficult, I discovered a perfect elixir to help take the edge off and put a smile on my face. It's not a cocktail, but rather a brilliant television comedy called Ted Lasso, about a constantly upbeat American college football coach from Kansas who was hired to manage a professional British soccer team. For quickly, show of hands, how many people have watched the show? All right, good. Good, okay. Never know. Now, despite Ted Lasso's outward displays of carefree happiness, he is troubled. The team's sports psychologist, Dr. Fieldstone, sees something in Ted that others don't, including Ted himself. She asks him repeatedly, "Ted, would you like to make an appointment?" "No, thanks, Doc, I'm good," he always replies. "I just don't trust therapists." This usually upbeat program ended on a dark note recently. After being overcome by a panic attack in the middle of a critical game, Ted left the field. He hid in Dr. Fieldstone's office and curled up on her couch. When Dr. Fieldstone found Ted there and asked if everything was all right, he looked up at her, troubled and desperate, and quietly said, "Doc, I'd like to make an appointment." I'd like to make an appointment. I've spoken these words before. Have you? Admitting to yourself that you're not quite right, and then making that phone call is difficult and scary. To acknowledge that we are in pain and that coping day to day is becoming harder requires us to be courageous and vulnerable. Judaism has many practices that enable us to plumb the depths of our souls as we work to become more whole in our relationships with God, with others, and with ourselves. We do many of these practices on Yom Kippur. We pray to God. We make amends with those we've hurt. We think about the ways we haven't lived up to our full potential. We reflect on the past and prepare for the future. Yom Kippur expects us to remove our masks that conceal our real selves. And this requires us to be honest and courageous, and yes, vulnerable. Yom Kippur serves as our annual mental health diagnostic exam, which we perform on ourselves. Now, for some, this is enough, but others need more. It may be the beginning of a journey that begins by saying, "Doc, I'd like to make an appointment." Many renowned figures in our tradition have struggled. Some have turned away from God, others have turned to God. Jonah, whose story is often told on Yom Kippur afternoon, was angry at God because of the prophetic mission that God called him to do. God told him to speak to the wicked people of Nineveh and tell them to change their ways. He tried to run away from God. He wanted God to take his life. But eventually, he returned to God and fulfilled his mission. Others, when in pain and struggling, have turned to God. Hannah, who we read about on Rosh Hashanah, was infertile, and her sister wife taunted her. When she went into the temple and prayed to God for a child, her lips moved, but words did not fall from her mouth. Eli the priest accused her of being drunk. She wasn't drunk. Rather, she was pouring her heart out to God. Once Eli realized this, he told her to go in peace and prayed that God would grant her request. She became pregnant, and her child Samuel became a great leader of Israel. Moses was angry about the sin of his people when they made the golden calf. He was ready to quit as he was fed up with their incessant complaints. Moses struggled with his people throughout his time as their leader, but he always turned to God for support. And Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who is known for finding joy in prayer and in the simple experiences of daily living, struggled with oftentimes chronic and debilitating depression for much of his life. These examples all have one common feature. Jonah, Hannah, Moses, and Nachman struggled alone. They didn't have friends or confidants. They didn't have a therapist. They had God, and that helped, but Ultimately, they were isolated and alone, mired in their own darkness. I believe that most of us find ourselves in a dark place at some point in our lives. In those times, do you keep your feelings to yourself or do you reach out to others? Do you pray to God? Lean on your friends? Sometimes our friends are very helpful. Other times we find someone who has been in a similar situation and helps us find our way out. Oftentimes we'll reach out to our closest friends first. They truly get us, we hope. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav shared this story. One day, two friends were talking to one another. "Do you love me?" says one to the other. "Of course I do," he replied. "So tell me, what hurts me?" the first friend asked. "How do I know what hurts you?" he replied, to which the first one responded, "If you don't know what hurts me, how can you say you love me?" Rabbi Nachman shared this story to help us understand what true relationships require. Again, courage, honesty, vulnerability. When a close friend asks, "How are you?" and you respond, "I'm fine," your truest friends will know when you're not being honest. And these days, most of us would be hard-pressed to honestly say, "I'm fine." How can we be fine? Pain, strife, conflict remain pervasive. Many feel empty, exhausted, defeated. Like the analogy of the shofar I taught last week, many of us feel hardened on the outside and empty on the inside. Last year, during an interview, Michelle Obama shared that she was dealing with a persistent low-grade depression. Quarantine, racial strife, and the political situation were contributing factors. Outwardly, she appears to have it all, but she is just like one-third of Americans who have reported experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety in the past 18 months. We may confide in our closest friends or family, and sometimes this isn't enough. We have to find the strength and courage to seek out help from a professional. We have to pick up the phone and say, "Doc, I'd like to make an appointment." The first time I made that call was 20 years ago, midway through my 5th and final year of rabbinical school. I was unhappy, uncertain, irritable, and anxious. I couldn't see the brightness of the future that lay ahead of me. I only saw clouds. Experiencing a crisis of faith and confidence was not where I expected to be finding myself several months before I was to be ordained as a rabbi. My academic advisor referred me to a therapist, a rabbi herself, and over the course of a few months, she helped me greatly improve my outlook and get me to a more stable place. She helped me restore confidence in myself and the passion for my work as I made the transition from student to rabbi. Now, a therapist is only part of the equation. We need to do the hard work ourselves to get us to a better place. We rely on our innermost circle to support us and love us unconditionally as we work to restore our mental health and our overall well-being. I'm fortunate to have Karen and a few trusted friends and colleagues who are there for me when I need them. I'm also fortunate to have a therapist to help me manage and process the challenges of this time. And after many years, I've learned that taking care of my mind and spirit is just as important as taking care of my body. My meditation practice, therapy, and cycling as much as possible are the pillars of my self-care regimen. When I maintain all of them, I'm at my best. And when we take care of ourselves, bodies, minds, spirits, souls, we can all be at our best. Yet for many of us, taking care of ourselves is challenging, especially in these days. We lack energy and motivation. We have a persistent case of the blahs. It has been longer for the past 18 months because our mental health continues to take a beating. We all have our worries and our stressors, finding work-life balance, managing our home budgets, worrying about our children or our aging parents, or both, concerns about the health of our marriages, increasing tensions within society, and diminishing civility within our community. Each weighs heavily on us. Sometimes it's hard to arise each day just to begin the day, And once awake, we eat more, exercise less, and find it hard to get things done. We struggle. And that is precisely why, on this day of introspection and truth-telling, I'm speaking about the need to take care of our own mental health and work to improve the collective mental health of our community. Too many in our community struggle mightily and often alone. We are failing as a synagogue community if Shir Emi, of all places, is not a safe place to express our troubles and concerns. Yom Kippur is about being honest, real, and vulnerable. We come into this sacred space to live by these values. Yom Kippur expects us to account for our personal and communal choices and to confront our struggles. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, again, once taught, struggle with your sadness, struggle with your soul. The point is not to rid yourself of struggle, but to accept it as a condition of being human. Rabbi Nachman is saying that these feelings are part of who we are. We can't rid ourselves of these facets of our lives. Rather, we need to create space for them and do our best to contain and manage what lives within us. There's nothing to be ashamed of, no reason to hide. We need to feel comfortable talking openly about our mental health and how we're feeling. We need to feel comfortable reaching out to friends, loved ones, me, the other clergy, to ask for help. You need to know that you are not alone and that there are people within this safe space who can help you. Yom Kippur is a hard day. Tomorrow may not be any easier. We will continue to struggle, but we can do so honestly, openly, and courageously, knowing that we don't have to struggle alone. I've missed the last couple episodes of Ted Lasso, so I'm not sure if his work with Dr. Fieldstone is working yet. I hope it does, because I, like all of the show's fans, are rooting for him. I hope as well that you can make the call. Reach out to your friends, meet with me, pray to God. I hope you can find ways to take care of your body, mind, and spirit. Our health depends on it, our community depends on it, because we are all in this together, and I am rooting for you. Ken Yehi Ratzon.